When it comes to movies, I prefer them to be good. So it's no surprise really that I didn't seem to enjoy the previous VHS movie all that much. It had likeable aspects to it, don't get me wrong, like when it ended, but I just found it to be nowhere near as gripping as its previous two installments. And that's where VHS 94 comes into play. VHS 94 being the fourth entry in the series, soon to be taken over by the upcoming VHS 99, meaning that there's soon to be more of these VHS movies than actual surviving VHS tapes. It doesn't entirely recapture the charm of watching the first two installments. Watching 4 of these movies almost back to back might have had something to do with that, but what it does attempt to do, it does well, and serves as an interesting watch for its entire duration. The movie begins with a woman in front of a bunch of TVs, dripping white goo all over the floor and leaving me questioning what exactly it is that she's just been watching. We then see someone practicing their counting skills as they sit in a chair counting down from 10 while bleeding from the eyes. Although I'm pretty sure the whole eyeball mutilation thing wasn't required for this mathematical activity. It then cuts to a SWAT team on their way to raid some kind of compound, as they're being filmed by cameraman Gary as he works for the reality TV show Police Brutality Caught on Camera. They arrive to find the place completely empty, until they come across someone sitting on a couch with their eyeballs gouged out, as apparently he's watched one too many videos from that guy Big Will, and after delving further into the compound, coming across more dead people in front of TVs, it then cuts to the first tape. But before the first tape, I want to ask, are you tired of being screwed by sponsorship interruptions? Well, how about trying to screw yourself instead, thanks to this video's sponsor, Adam and Eve. Yeah, I really did just do that. Using discount code BIGWILL, head over to adamandeve.com for 50% off one item, plus free shipping across most of the US and Canada. And if you want your neighbour to think that you've just ordered a flashlight instead of that other one, then no need to worry, thanks to their discreet shipping, and thanks to their 24/7 customer service, just in case you can't figure out where to put it, and their 90-day no-hassle return, things are easier than ever. Also, 20% of their profit goes to fight the spread of HIV around the world, and you wouldn't want HIV to win, would you? So check it out in the description or the pinned comment. The first tape is Storm Drain, directed by Chloe Okuno, and it begins with a TV news report talking about the local sightings of what they call Ratman, leaving me thinking, do you reckon it does zoomies like a dog? It cuts back and forth between a few different witnesses being interviewed, from local kids to a minister to some dude who likes to hang out near sewers with machine guns. Well, everybody's got to have a hobby, I guess. The reporter Holly and her cameraman Jeff receive news that their higher-ups would like them to record footage from inside the sewers, because apparently their bosses would love them to walk around the office with the fresh stench of poo on their shoes. And after hearing a noise coming from within, Jeff spots what he thinks is a person behind them, for it to then be revealed that it's just a blanket stuffed with children's toys and a bottle of alcohol, meaning that someone down here has a really strange idea of partying. The discovery persuades Holly to go in further, in the pursuit of poo-covered shoes, but to also find out if there's people living down here that she can exploit for her own success. And as they turn a corner, they find a man standing there, before he simply turns around and disappears into the darkness. And while invading this man's personal space to record inside his tent, Jeff's startled to see something open its eyes before it scurries off into the darkness. They approach a person covered in dirt to presumably ask where they can get some for themselves, but after he tells them that the Ratman lives down here, he gives them a nice big friendly smile as blood begins pouring from his mouth, which is totally a normal thing to do. Terrified by the sight of a clearly mentally unwell sewer dweller, they take off running, as they'd rather leave this man in a literal sewer than face the current global mental health crisis. But suddenly, Jeff comes to a stop as he can hear Holly's screams. Jeff, not subscribing to that simp mindset, immediately turns around to leave her there, before immediately being grabbed by someone else. The camera then cuts to someone engaging in some very normal and definitely not slightly concerning behaviour as they film an unconscious woman, before she then wakes up surrounded and with her hands restrained, just in case she tries to steal some of their precious sewer treasure. She pleads with them, telling the subterranean poo-scented people that she could get help by bringing awareness to them, until suddenly, the same minister that she'd interviewed earlier that day appears and tells her that they're going to tell their own story. What's this guy a minister of? A minister of coolness, apparently. Jeff, also restrained, is dragged over to one of the tunnels to be greeted by the scent of human fecal matter wafting its way towards him, when all of a sudden he becomes the one producing human fecal matter as the Ratman emerges from the darkness to kindly deposit some spit for the minister. The spit fetishist takes the liquid and introduces Jeff to the easiest and most efficient skincare routine, known as I Don't Have Any, before pouring it all over Jeff's face as it dissolves his skin right down to the bone. They then drag Holly face to face with this rather handsome looking young boy, who proceeds to rather rudely salivate all over her as it then cuts to a commercial for a veggie masher. I think the demonic rat spit would do a much better job mashing your veggies than that thing. We then see Holly back in the TV studio, seemingly completely normal, appearing as if she hadn't just made out with an ancient demonic otherworldly rat being while being surrounded by a couple of dudes covered in dirt, is what I was thinking, until she then proceeded to projectile vomit her own black acidic substance all over her co-host, because something just ain't right about that. As her co-host quickly finds himself as her ex-co-host, she looks into the camera and proceeds to carry on with her news report as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. Talk about a good work ethic. Back with the SWAT raid, they come across what appears to be a makeshift church filled with a random assortment of mannequin parts and the occasional human eyeball for good measure. And as they look at the big screen, the next tape, The Empty Wake, directed by Simon Barrett, begins to play. The tape begins in the incredibly exciting, fun location to hang out in, funeral home, as we see a woman named Haley getting ready to host her first wake for a man named Andrew. The family have asked for the entire event to be filmed, as you never know when you might want to show the grandkids some random dead dude one day, and as her co-workers leave, Haley's left alone with Andrew in an oversized shoebox as she waits for the family to arrive. It's just a shame Andrew isn't exactly in the mood for conversation. The hours go by, and not a single member of Andrew's family has shown up yet. And to top it off, due to the storm, the lights will occasionally flicker, giving a whole rave in the grave feeling to this funeral home. And while alone, chilling out and vibing to the funeral home music, Haley suddenly hears something that she thinks is coming from inside the casket. Andrew really hates this song. The lights go out again, and as a flash of lightning illuminates the room, you can see what appears to be someone standing in the doorframe. Have you got a moment to talk about our Lord? So using the light from the camera, Haley heads to the storage closet for some candles, but as soon as she lights them up, the power comes back on. But as she walks back into the main room, she notices that the casket is slightly crooked, and as she attempts to push it back into place, something inside suddenly makes a loud noise, terrifying her in the process. So after talking to one of her co-workers on the phone about the slight issue of there being a demonic presence in that casket, he assures her that what she's hearing is just gases leaving the body, so dead people farts. Great. Someone finally decides to come and pay a visit to poor old dead dude with a flatulence problem, before sitting down near the casket, reciting a few words, and then leaving again. And just as quick as he entered, Haley is now alone in the room with Andrew. After passing the time by talking to a friend on the phone, she learns that the deceased died by jumping from a church. The power suddenly goes out, and she hears yet another knock coming from the coffin before beginning to hear other noises in the building. The coffin continues to knock repeatedly, as apparently this man's last meal was nothing more than a plate full of baked beans, before it violently jolts and everything falls off. After realizing that the front doors have been chained shut, Haley walks back into the main room to find the coffin tipped over and empty, with the pungent smell of methane gas floating around in the air. She then notices the not-so-deceased Mr. Edwards staring blankly at a wall, before learning that he was in fact staring at nothing due to the little-known condition named I have no face. After she screams, he attempts to come for her, but struggles on account of the other half of his face being smeared all over the sidewalk downtown somewhere. So with her realizing that he can't see her, she attempts to sneak away, but after watching his insides fall all over the outsides, he suddenly runs at her just as the storm blows out all of the windows and sends everything flying across the room. The camera comes back on to reveal the sheer destruction caused to the room, when all of a sudden, we see Haley hobbling over to the window, looking as if she just wrestled a dude with half a cranium and won. Back with the SWAT team, they enter a room to come across the grisly discovery of a pile of stuffed children's toys. Oh, and the severed body parts are pretty gross too, I guess. And after passing by this sadistic version of Build-A-Bear workshop, they find rooms full of upside-down crosses, meaning one of two things. Either whoever hung these up was blind, or someone's got a bone to pick with the big guy upstairs. And after noticing another TV at the end of the hall, the third tape begins to play. The Subject, directed by Timo Taianto. The tape begins with a man waking up with his head restrained, for him to then realise that his entire body has been removed and replaced with some kind of robotic spider, leaving him looking like one of those toys from Sid's bedroom in Toy Story, before he then falls to the ground and spontaneously combusts. You know, as you do. We then see Sid, all grown up and somehow now a disgraced Indonesian doctor, as he has two people restrained behind him, a male and a female. And much like Sid from Toy Story, the doctor picks up a saw and begins grinding his way into the back of the female's skull to get to the good stuff. Sometime later, we see from the perspective of one of the victims, the doctor appearing ecstatic as whatever kind of experiment he's conducted has been a success. The experiment to merge a human and a GoPro apparently, as we're seeing all of this from the perspective of one of his victims, who the last time I checked, certainly didn't have a camera to hand. Just don't ask me how they changed the film. The doctor says that he's been successfully able to merge humans and machines together, before she then looks to her right hand to reveal not a right hand. After watching the doctor proceeding to cut off the man's arm and head for his personal body part collection, it cuts to him attaching a robotic blade arm to the man. Well, that's no fair. He got a cool blade arm and she got, well, no arm. The doctor then finds out through a news report that various body parts have been discovered and that he's the main suspect in this whole body part disposal operation. After attempting to drill into the female's face to give her a few extra breathing holes, he acts all surprised when she'd rather not let him do that, so responds to this by attempting to end her with a metal tray. No overreaction much, but before he's able to finish the job, someone begins banging on the door. His Uber Eats is here. Armed police with a cameraman of their own, because apparently there's an awful lot of them going around lately, kick open the door and fire. With him dead, they find the woman, and with the commander surmising that due to the camera protruding from her skull means she has no soul, he decides to kill her. Because remember kids, if it ain't got a soul, feel free to kill it. But as he's about to, the power goes out and the woman crawls away. An alarm begins ringing and they discover that they're locked in the building. So after going all American on the door to get it open, an explosive suddenly goes off, doing what explosives do best. Explode. Suddenly the male, who was being turned into a human toaster, wakes up and impales one of the officers with his sword, before a bunch of other officers who are shooting at the creature, yet simultaneously close enough to get grabbed by it, are unsurprisingly dealt with too. So the commander, in his infinite wisdom, decides to let off a grenade in a tightly enclosed space, because who wants to live anyway? After cutting back to the perspective of the woman, she wakes up from the blast and to the smell of a bunch of crispy Indonesian dudes and finds a way out of the room. But while being pursued by the creature, she falls through a precariously placed hole in the floor and comes across a schematic for a weapon that looks as if it's meant to attach to her arm. I thought that stump was meant for an electric whisk or something. She pulls back a cloth to reveal the top half of a pickled head, so decides to go look in the mirror, where she then discovers that it's her top half of a pickled head, as it's all been replaced with electronics. After hearing someone calling out to her, she follows the voice to find a mechanical severed head talking to her before turning around and running the other way. Because ooh, gross. She finds many more failed experiments, including an alive woman on a table whose insides have been entirely replaced with electronics, and after mercy killing her, because also ooh gross, she's almost shot by an officer before proceeding to beat him senseless with her metal stump, before then finding the weapon attachment for said metal stump. She attaches it, and this survival horror quickly evolves into a first-person shooter. After quite literally blowing someone's mind, she uses him as a human shield and mows down multiple more with her seemingly infinite amount of ammo, before firing a grenade from her arm and turning someone into red mist, because grenade launchers are cool. After performing open-jaw surgery on another person who thinks it's wise to attack a woman with a grenade launcher for a hand, she finds their cameraman who actually wants to help her instead of kill her. But she's suddenly shot at by their commander, as he's really not a fan of doing the right thing, and after running out of shots, he begins to beat her and rip out her electronics. At least buy her a drink first, Commander. But as he's about to finish her off, he's shot by the cameraman, who's then immediately killed by the butter knife arm who proceeds to slice him up. The woman kills the creature by pulling out its brain with her bare hands, or bare hand I should say, before collapsing to the floor after a hard day of trying really hard not to get killed. And the tape comes to an end with us seeing her get up and walk away on a CCTV camera. Back with the American SWAT team, who aren't insistent on killing innocent women who they were sent to save, we learn that they're actually insistent on killing their own team members, as two of the officers are actually involved with the compound they're currently raiding. They've kidnapped one of their own, and as they're pretending to look for him with another one, he drops to his knees in front of a TV screen, and the next tape begins to play. Terror, directed by Ryan Prowse. The tape begins with a couple of rootin' tootin' armed men outside of the First Patriots movement compound, an extremist group looking to do some rather extreme stuff, like making a rather big mess inside of their shed, as we see them enter, raise their weapon, and fire at a captive. It then cuts to them out on some kind of scouting mission, as they send a cameraman to scope out a government building, and when he returns, they talk about walking the beast in and hitting the building when it's full, meaning they either like to punch brick buildings or blow them up. Either way, two really bad ideas. We once again see them in the shed with the man, surprisingly sporting what appears to not be a giant hole in his skull, and they shoot him again, because screw this guy. Twice. We then see a police officer arrive at the compound, bringing with him a truckload of heavy weaponry, as he tells the group that they have friends in all kinds of places, like the library, so don't worry about that overdue book. They shoot the shed man again, because they're just having fun with it at this point, and begin to collect the blood dripping from the wound. And using the collected blood, They inject it into a rabbit and run away as the sun begins coming up, because melanoma is no joke. And upon contact with the sunlight, the rabbit with the injected blood erupts into a loud, powerful explosion that sends the leader of the militia flying onto his back, which apparently is a good enough cause as any to get absolutely wasted, which sounds like an excellent idea for a bunch of clearly mentally unstable men with access to firearms to do. And by mentally unstable, I mean 2 of them decide to go and mess with their explodey blood prisoner, which results in one of the men holding said prisoner getting absolutely covered in his blood due to his leaky brain syndrome. The next morning, the other members come outside to find one of the geniuses dead before a loud bang is heard coming from the shed, followed by a severed head being thrown out. Calm, collected, and clearly well trained, one of the militia members decides to immediately start firing their mounted machine gun, which due to the sheer force of it, and them being a weak little boy, banks sideways, tearing through another member of the group, until the shooter is shot from behind as he can't quite grasp the concept of letting go of a trigger. After the chaos, a 3rd man then emerges from the shed absolutely covered in blood, which in turn causes everyone else to be absolutely covered in blood. And knowing that come nightfall they won't stand a chance, they arm up and take on the creature. And by take on the creature, I mean receive the forbidden hickey and get absolutely torn to shreds. After heading up into the darkness, something that isn't advisable against a creature of darkness by the way, the cameraman accidentally shoots the leader in the leg, before being taken to the floor to have his face quite literally sucked from the bone. Tastes like fried chicken, or so I've heard. Wanting to go out with a bang, the creature then places the leader into the shed and hits the button to let the sunlight into the room, causing him to explode, while taking out the leader and the entire compound in the process. And as it cuts back to the SWAT team, we see one of them with their eyes being not exactly where they should, that being his head, before another officer wakes up restrained. The very same officer seen in the tape, who was shown on camera, providing the militia group with the heavy weaponry that they only seem to be able to use on themselves. The traitor female officers remove their uniforms, play dress up, and then proceed to beat the man with the video camera, where it's then revealed that these women actually make some of these tapes, before the movie then comes to an end, after showing us the remains of the officer looking like a mangled pile of afterbirth. Before we finish up, I'd just like to give a big thank you to all of my YouTube members and patrons. If you'd like to receive access to the private Discord server to see uncensored versions of all of my videos, then maybe consider becoming a YouTube member or a patron if that's your cup of tea. So starting with the YouTube members, a big thank you to Grumpy Old Man, Laurie Resendiz, Tony Kidden, Cal Ballinger, Billy Bad Cables, Gary Braunbeck, Psycho, Cobe Redbeam, and Exgerticus. And for the patrons, a big thank you to Dom, Hunters263, Rebecca Pitts, A Dandy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Jarrett C. Bees, Pascal Mathis, Fighting the Pirates, Richard McGowan III, Chris, Dennis, Wade Knott, Ashley L. Wintz, Joshua Torres, Remy, Fire Goes Fast, Josh Brooks, Dyrene, Robert Zerweck, Dark Shiva, Josh Hannon, Billy Whitaker, Axel Not Chicken Imp, Lonif J. Slows, Daniel Dickinson, Donnie Do Work, G-Source, Fatty Ghost, Miguel, Owen, Curtis Mayer, Mackenzie Riley, Louisa Floyd, Bryson, John Smith, Madrick, Andrew Miranda, Scott Scherberger, Stephen Weber, Channing Mars, Arnav Singh, Michael Attikpa, Shelby, Benjamin Bronson, Ryan Trowbridge, Jan Nicholas Roher, and Banklogs. So once again, thank you so much to YouTube members and patrons for supporting, and thank you to everyone else for watching.